Friends from the media, welcome to today's press conference. The Fight Crime Committee just held a meeting. The Secretary for Security, Mr. P.K. Tang, will deliver opening remarks on the crime situation in the first half of this year. And then Mr. Victor Pang, member of the FCC, will talk about commercial crime and tech crime situation. And then the floor will be open for questions and answers. Secretary. Good afternoon, friends from the media, Hong Kong citizens. We just had a meeting with the Fight Crime Committee and we discussed the crime situation in the first half of 2022 as well as a commercial and technology crime situation during the same period. Let me start by saying something about the crime situation in the first half of this year, and then Mr. Victor Pang will tell us something about the commercial and technology crime in the same period. During the reporting period, we recorded 31,434 crimes, up by 1.8% comparing to the same period last year, and that is 563 more cases. We recorded 4,084 violent crimes, down by 12.2%. The rise in the overall crime figures mainly had to do with an increase in deception cases, that is up by 3,627 cases. In other words, this rate of increase for deception cases surpassed the rise in the overall crime figures. For crimes registering a drop for theft, criminal damage, and wounding and serious assault, the figures dropped from 11.6% and to 21.3%. As for robbery cases, we only recorded 41 cases. That means fewer than 2 cases per week in a 7 million population city. Burglary cases down by 48.6%, 381 cases in other words. For rape, wounding and serious assault, snatching, pickpocketing, and theft from vehicle, all these crimes registered the lowest half-yearly statistics since 1977. And that shows Hong Kong is a very safe place. For crimes registering an increase, we have deception, 12,326, up by 40% or 42%. And in fact, deception accounts for over 40% of overall crimes, and 70% of them had to do with online frauds. The rise basically is attributable to online shopping frauds, telephone deceptions, investment frauds, and job scams. So apart from detecting crimes, we also need to work on enhancing publicity. In the first half of this year, the Anti-Deception Coordination Center received more than 14,000 calls from the public, and we successfully stopped 314 deceptions, intercepting $720 million worth of scam money. We also recorded 921 blackmail cases, up by 30%, and 77% of them had to do with naked chat cases. Students or university students accounted for the biggest victim group of some 40%, and over 60% of victims were aged 30 or below. For homicide cases, we recorded 16, up by 60%, and all of them have been detected. 11 of these cases had to do with domestic or in-family violence. As for the other 5 cases, they had to do with triads, disputes, and persons with mental issues. Child abuse cases, there is a drop of 17 cases or 3%, down to 554 cases. Last year, in a child abuse case in a child care center, we arrested and prosecuted 34 staff members, 3 of whom have been convicted with sentences passed from terms of imprisonment 4 months to 7 months. In July, the police established the Vulnerable Witness Support Cadre to enhance investigator training and cooperation with stakeholders to protect children and the vulnerable groups. As for narcotics, the crime figures dropped by 10%. As for crime, drugs involving youth, we also registered a drop because of the severe epidemic situation. The drug traffickers adopted a new modus operandi, and very often drugs are smuggled in large quantities by sea and air. And for juveniles and young persons, 1,245 were arrested, a drop comparing to last year. And as for juvenile crimes, we registered a drop in the figures in offences such as robbery, misconduct in public places, affray in possession of offensive weapons. Well, we need to be vigilant as far as Hong Kong national security law is concerned. As of the 30th of June, we arrested 201 persons, and over 60% of them have been prosecuted. And among those already prosecuted, 12 of them have been convicted with a maximum sentence of 9 years of imprisonment. Well, we need to continue to exercise the greatest vigilance against lone wolf and local radicals and foreign forces for their acts of endangering national security. And I'd also like to speak on Hong Kong citizens being lured to Southeast Asian countries and locked up. And we've set up a dedicated task force comprising members of the Immigration Department and the Hong Kong Police Force. And as of today, we have so far received 41 requests for help, and 24 of them have confirmed themselves to be safe, and 16 of them have returned to Hong Kong. As for the remaining 17 callers, 4 persons, as we know, are in Myanmar and 13 are in Cambodia. And we believe that they are not free to leave at the moment. And starting from the 20th of August, the Security Bureau is working with the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Hong Kong SAR and the Chinese Embassy in these places, as well as our dedicated task force and the ETOs in these places. We successfully helped 5 Hong Kong citizens returning safely to Hong Kong, and there are also 5 other Hong Kong citizens having boarded the flight returning to Hong Kong, and a few more will be coming back later tonight. Among the 41 cases of requests for help, as we understand, 39 cases involve luring Hong Kong citizens to Southeast Asian countries to work, and 1 case involved online romance scam, and 3 other cases are still pending investigation. And so far, we have not found any Hong Kong citizen being kidnapped whilst traveling in Southeast Asian countries in the street in broad daylight. And through Interpol, we are liaising with enforcement agencies in other countries to try to rescue those stranded. We have the Organized Crime and Triad Bureau, and so far we have arrested 7 individuals, 5 males and 2 females, and 3 of them have been charged with conspiracy to defraud. For 2 of these males, we believe them to be the key syndicate members. They published fake job openings online, advertising high salaries and low entry requirements to lure victims to these places before they're locked up.
We attach a lot of importance to publicity to guard against repeated incidents. We have added some pleas for people to guard against these scams, and at the boarding counters, we're also reminding people of the importance of guarding against these kind of scams. We also resort to the social media, radio programs, TV programs, and also places where there are a lot of people going. The publications, government venues, commercial premises, we are advertising these anti-scam messages. Going forward, we'll try to rescue these those being held captive. We will make sure that they will come back to Hong Kong safe, and we will be mounting further publicity in this regard. I'll now hand you over to Mr. Victor Tang to brief you on the commercial and technology crimes, and then I welcome questions. Thanks very much, Secretary. The Fight Crime Committee at the meeting scrutinized the commercial crime and technology crime in the first half of the year. First of all, the commercial crimes in 2022, the first half, investment scams registered 1271 cases, up by 693, up by 1.1%, involving a sum of $720 million. The sum is actually down by 68% on the same period last year. Employment scams, 1706, up by 1349 cases, or 3.7%, involving a sum of $230 million. Given the pandemic and economic downturn, people are vulnerable to these crimes in a desperation to find jobs. The perpetrators would get in touch with the victims online. They provide job opportunities that do not require any particular qualifications, but with attractive pay, and they would be able to earn some commissions, and they will also be lured to surrender their personal particulars, and without the knowledge of the victims, the personal particulars would be used to apply for loans or to pay guaranteed sums or to borrow money to earn commissions. On behalf of the FCC, I urge the members of the public to stay vigilant and not to get lured into these traps. They should be made aware of all the modus operandi. Commercial crimes, the number stands at 10613, up by 3343 on the same period last year, or 46%, involving a sum of $1.5 billion. Mainly, these have to do with the employment scam, investment scam, and online scam, and naked chats. There have been 40% increase, or threefold. In the first half of 2022, in terms of commercial crimes and technology crimes, we have seen an increase. The police, together with various other departments, the Hong Kong MA, and the Hong Kong Banking Association, come up with strategies to prevent the crimes from happening and to intercept the money. The police will be working hard to tackle these cases. The police have detected a number of syndicates, arresting 260 people, involving a sum of $500 plus million. In terms of publicity, the police will be resorting to the social media and press briefings to heighten public awareness about the latest modus operandi. The FCC urges the public to call the police if they have any suspicion, or they should call the 24 ADCC hotline 18222 for inquiries and also to seek assistance. Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary and Mr. Pang. It's now time for questions. Please raise your hand and wait for the mic to come along. Please limit yourselves to 2 questions and identify the organizations you represent. Second row, the one in white T-shirt. Ming Pao Daily, 2 questions about crimes, burglary. There seems to be a decrease, so why is it the case? Also, human trafficking cases. Some academics are saying that existing legislation that doesn't include the exploitation of laborers. How will you amend the legislation to provide better deterrent effect? And also the quarantine facilities, what is the occupancy rate? Will the 3rd and 4th centers be opened up? And there are 4 top officials getting infected in as many days. Will you be tracing the places they've been to, and how are you going to be stamping the chain of transmission? Right, the decrease in these cases, that's because of our good publicity. We have 3 nil buildings, and they've also installed the security gates and CCTVs in the rural communities. So we got the assistance of a lot of rural people, and many anti-burglary facilities have been put in place, and hence the decrease. Second, human trafficking. In Hong Kong has never been a place for human trafficking. We have 50 or so pieces of or sections in the legislation to tackle these problems. So we do have sufficient legislative provisions. And we also have a mechanism whereby for the sex workers, illegal immigrants, and illegal workers, imported workers or suspects, we do try to identify them to ascertain whether there is any case of human trafficking. We have carried out 6,900 these identification exercises in 2021, 700 such exercises have been carried out, and we have picked up quite a number of suspects. Also, the community isolation facilities at Penny's Bay and Kai Tak, we do have these facilities. At Penny's Bay, the occupancy rate is about 80%, whereas in Kai Tak, it is about 30%. And of course, we do have makeshift facilities in other places when necessary. We can swing them into action to take on people. Now, we do have clear guidelines regarding the close contacts, and senior officials or any member of the public will have to observe the anti-pandemic protocol, and they have to make sure that they will be steering clear of the virus. The lady in the second row, please.
Thanks. So, question from SCMP. So, some say that there are much sophisticated law in mainland China, which clearly and effectively targets the trafficking of persons aboard, and with more tougher penalties. Will the Security Bureau review our laws and considering to toughening it? And second, some experts said that Hong Kong did not conduct enough screening for suspicious departures at the airport to prevent human trafficking cases. And there were not enough collaboration with law enforcement in Myanmar and Cambodia. So what would you do so to solve this problem? Thank you.
First of all, Hong Kong is never a originated country or a transit place or a destination for human trafficking. And as a matter of fact, we have over 50 different offenses which in different ordinance that can handle situations relating to trafficking in persons. And actually, we have a very robust initial screening mechanism to try to identify if there is any person being trafficked in Hong Kong or in or out of Hong Kong. As a matter of fact, in the year 2020, we have conducted 6,900 of such kind of screening, and we have identified 3 victims. And in 2021, we have conducted 7,700 of these kind of screening, and we have only identified 1 victim. So we have either sufficient law and a robust system in handling if there is any trafficking activities in Hong Kong. And the second question is about cooperation. In fact, we also have a robust cooperation with overseas law enforcement agencies by either bilateral basis or through Interpol channel to tackle those cross jurisdictional offenses. Thank you.
好，下一條，左邊。
Next question on the left-hand side, the second row. This reporter, I'm from Now TV. You mentioned just now for Hong Kong NSL-related offences, 200 persons have been arrested, but only a dozen have been convicted. Can you expedite the progress? And about returnees to Hong Kong, is the Hong Kong government responsible for quarantine? And for requests for help, do they come from family members of Hong Kong residents or the Hong Kong residents themselves? Right, in relation to arrests under the Hong Kong national security law, For all the cases concluded, all the defendants have been convicted. And there are different factors at play as to when the case would conclude. For example, complexity of the case, whether there are legal disputes and other legal requirements, legal hurdles we need to go through. So be it investigation, prosecution, and court proceedings, I think the common goal is to conclude these cases as quickly as possible. Sorry, can I have your second question again? Quarantine arrangements. For those we've arranged to come back to Hong Kong, we follow all the quarantine arrangements and requirements according to the law requiring quarantine. Any other questions? This one at the back in blue. I'm from Cable. About job scams in Southeast Asian countries. For requests for help, do the calls come from family members in Hong Kong or the victims themselves? How did they contact you? And about those arrested in Hong Kong, is there anything you can tell about their remuneration and any motive for committing these crimes? And about the top government officials getting infected, can you tell whether they ever attended a meal gathering together, and has the work been affected? For requests for help, they came from the victims as well as the family members of victims. For those who have been arranged to come back, basically the victims got into contact with us through the embassies, through the embassy and through the ETOs in these places. Now, for the arrested persons, 3 have been prosecuted, and I'm not in a position to disclose further details. About top government officials getting infected, we follow all the Department of Health requirements and legal requirements in conducting investigation. Last question. This one at the back, I'm from Hong Kong 01. About victims returning from the exploitation scandal. Can you tell us about their age and their experience, whether they had been abused and how long had they been locked up? And about government officials infected, how many government officials have to be quarantined? And about the liability issues of a mirror concert, is there any update? If there's any information about, for example, the weight of the screen? The 5 Hong Kong citizens are in good health condition. And for other details, I will provide them later. And about the number of government officials infected and the isolation arrangements, I will take this question to other government departments. I don't have information at hand. About the investigation of the mirror concert incident, the police spares no effort in conducting investigation, and it is possible that this will end by prosecution. So I'm not in a position to disclose details. Thank you. That marks the end of this press conference.